I found out the truth about what happened at my fiance's bachelorette party, and now she's pregnant with a child that isn't mine. Let me take you through the nightmare that has become my life. Before diving into the story, I want to thank everyone who supports this channel. Subscribing is an easy, free way to help us grow and continue delivering great content. Your support means everything, and we appreciate it more than you know. Now, on to today's video. Hi, Reddit. I've read stories like this before and thought, thank God that's not me. Well, now it is. So buckle up. This one's a mess. I'm 35, married for 8 years, and until recently, I thought my life was solid. My wife, Elena, and I shared a nice house, had stable jobs, and were planning to start a family. Turns out, I was living in a fool's paradise. It all started a few months ago on a Saturday. While Elena was out shopping, gossiping, or doing whatever she does, I decided to clean out our spare room, the dumping ground for all the junk we couldn't throw away. As I was sorting through the clutter, I came across an old hard drive I didn't even remember owning. Curious, I plugged it into my laptop to see what was on it. Most of the files were harmless. Old photos, vacation videos, random downloads from our early days of sharing a computer. Then I found a folder titled Bachelorette Memories. Let me be clear. I wasn't snooping. The folder was right there, and I assumed it would be funny to see some harmless clips from her bachelorette party. I expected tipsy karaoke, silly games, or maybe a few raunchy jokes. But what I saw was far from funny. The first video seemed innocent enough. Elena and her bridesmaids laughing, taking shots, and wearing those cheesy bride-to-be crowns. Then I clicked on the second video and everything changed. It showed a club scene with loud music, flashing lights, and a male stripper dressed as a firefighter. At first, Elena was just watching, but soon she was all over him, grinding, touching, acting like she was auditioning for some trashy reality show. My stomach churned, but it got worse. The footage jumped to a hotel room where she wasn't just flirting. She was full-on making out with him like her life depended on it. I froze, staring at the screen in disbelief. My first thought was that this had to be a joke. My second thought was, why the hell would she save this? When Elena came home, I didn't even wait for her to take off her shoes. Holding up the hard drive, I said, "We need to talk." She gave me that annoyed look she reserves for when I interrupt her endless Instagram scrolling. "What now, Marcus?" she sighed. "I found some videos on this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her expression remained indifferent. "What videos?" "Your bachelorette party," I replied, locking eyes with her. Her face went pale for a second before she rolled her eyes. "Oh, for God's sake, Marcus, that was years ago. Why are you bringing this up now?" I couldn't believe her reaction. "Elena, you cheated on me with a stripper. I saw the video." She shrugged like I'd accused her of forgetting to do the laundry. "It was my bachelorette party. It's not a big deal. Everyone does it." My jaw nearly hit the floor. "Everyone does it? Are you seriously trying to justify this?" Crossing her arms, she gave me the condescending look she's mastered. "You're overreacting. It wasn't an affair. It was a one-night thing. I was drunk, and it was before we were even married. Let it go." "Let it go," I repeated, my voice rising. "You kept this from me for 8 years, and now you're telling me to just let it go?" She rolled her eyes again, clearly unbothered. "It's not like I slept with him. It was just harmless fun. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd blow it out of proportion. And look, you're proving me right." Her audacity left me speechless. Not only was she unapologetic, but she acted like I was the problem. "I trusted you," I said, my voice trembling. "You betrayed me." "This isn't some minor mistake, Elena. You lied to me for years." Then she flipped the script, as only Elena can. "Grow up, Marcus. You're acting like a child. It's been 8 years. Are you really going to throw everything away over something stupid I did before we even said I do?" I couldn't bear to look at her. Grabbing my keys, I left the house without a plan, driving aimlessly until I ended up at a park. Sitting on a bench, I replayed her words in my mind. "It's not a big deal. Everyone does it. Let it go. Was I overreacting? No. Cheating is cheating, and her complete lack of remorse made it worse. When I returned home, she was on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. "Are you done with your little tantrum?" she asked without even glancing up. I didn't respond. I went straight to the bedroom, closed the door, and slept on the couch that night. Since then, I haven't been able to look at her the same way. Every time she smiles or touches me, all I can think about is that video and her indifference. I don't know what's next, but one thing is certain. I'm not the same person I was before my entire world crumbled around me. Maybe we could fix this, I thought. Like a fool, I agreed to try marriage counseling. Elena was the one who suggested it, which I foolishly took as a sign she was remorseful and ready to make amends. She wasn't. But back then, I was desperate to salvage our marriage. We began seeing Dr. Fields, an older therapist with a calm demeanor that reminded me of a wise grandmother. Her neutral approach was probably the only thing that kept me from completely losing it during our sessions. I walked into the first session determined to be honest, hoping we could make progress. Dr. Fields started by asking why we were there. Before I could speak, Elena jumped in with a fake sigh. Marcus has been so distant and angry lately, she said. He keeps bringing up something that happened years ago before we were even married, and it's making it hard to move forward. The audacity. She made it sound like I was obsessing over nothing. When it was my turn, I didn't hold back. I told Dr. Fields about finding the video, how Elena had hidden it for 8 years, and how shattered my trust in her was. Elena didn't even look at me. She sat there rolling her eyes, acting as if I were wasting her time. When Dr. Fields asked why she hadn't told me sooner, Elena shrugged and said, I didn't think it was a big deal. It was one night, and it didn't mean anything. So my marriage was falling apart over something she claimed didn't mean anything. Things didn't improve after that. Every session felt like a repetitive cycle. I'd pour my heart out about the pain and my inability to trust her, and Elena would dismiss it with an eye roll or say something like, Marcus, you're blowing this way out of proportion. One time, I admitted how foolish I felt for not realizing sooner. Instead of showing any empathy, Elena laughed and said, well, maybe if you hadn't been digging around on old hard drives, you wouldn't be so upset now. Outside of therapy, things were even worse. While I agonized over how to rebuild our relationship, Elena acted as if nothing was wrong. She'd come home late from work or after dinner with friends, offering vague excuses that didn't hold up. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. After all, I already didn't trust her. But then I started noticing patterns. She'd dress up for these so-called dinners, putting in more effort than she ever did for our dates. Heels, makeup, the works. When I asked who she was meeting, she'd reply vaguely, oh, just the girls. Yet there were no signs of these outings on her social media, no photos, no tags, no check-ins. One night, she came home close to midnight. I was waiting on the couch when she walked in, startled to see me. Oh, she said, freezing in the doorway. You're still up? Yeah, I replied. Where were you? She hesitated before shrugging. Just out with Chelsea. We got caught up talking. Chelsea, her best friend, is notorious for documenting every aspect of her life online. If they'd been together, there would have been posts, stories, something. But there was nothing. That's when the doubts crept in. Was she cheating again? Was she lying about her late nights and work dinners? I couldn't hold it in any longer. One evening, I asked her directly if she was seeing someone else. Her reaction was explosive. How dare you? She screamed, tears streaming down her face. I've been trying so hard to fix this, and you accuse me of cheating? She stormed off, slamming the bedroom door behind her. But her meltdown didn't reassure me. It only made me more suspicious. The breaking point came during another therapy session. Dr. Fields asked Elena if she felt she was doing everything she could to rebuild trust. Elena crossed her arms and replied, I think I've done more than enough. Marcus just won't move on. He's stuck in the past, and nothing I do is ever going to be enough for him. It felt like a slap in the face. I had bent over backward to forgive her and save our marriage, yet she had the nerve to act like I was the problem. After that, I started tracking her late nights. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed answers. I checked her phone when she wasn't around, skimmed her emails, and even noted her car's mileage. The inconsistencies piled up. She'd claimed to be going one place, but her mileage didn't match. She received random texts from unknown numbers, brushing them off as work stuff. Don't be paranoid, she'd say with a dismissive laugh. By this point, therapy felt pointless. Dr. Fields kept urging us to communicate and rebuild trust, but how could I trust someone still sneaking around? I felt like a fool for even trying. Elena wasn't making any effort to repair what was broken. She didn't care about fixing our marriage. She didn't even care enough to cover her tracks. 7 months into therapy, I couldn't take it anymore. I stopped attending sessions. Honestly, I think Elena was relieved. She dropped the pretense of caring and went right back to her old behavior. I began seriously considering divorce. It wasn't an easy choice, and I wrestled with the decision for weeks. 8 years of marriage isn't something you can walk away from easily without feeling like you failed. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I couldn't continue living like this. I deserved more than a life filled with doubts, deceit, and a wife who showed no respect for me or our relationship. What if I divorced my wife for this reason? Tonight, I plan to tell Elena about my decision. I'll update you on how things unfold. Update 1. Sorry for the delay in updating. It's been chaotic, and things didn't go as I had hoped. It's taken me some time to gather my thoughts because, honestly, I feel lost right now. It all happened on a regular Tuesday night. We had just finished another painfully quiet dinner where barely a word was exchanged. Elena, as usual, was glued to her phone, scrolling endlessly while I tried to figure out the right moment to bring up the D word. Before I could say anything, she suddenly set her phone down and said, "We need to talk." I froze. Those words usually signaled another argument about how I wouldn't let go of the past. Bracing myself, I sighed. What now? Instead of launching into her usual complaints, she reached into her bag and slid something across the table. It took me a moment to realize what it was, a pregnancy test. Positive. "We're having a baby," she said, her expression expectant, as if she thought I'd jump up and celebrate. I didn't. I just stared at the test, my mind racing. This should have been joyous news, right? But all I could think about was how little I trusted her, and whether the baby was even mine. "Are you sure?" I finally asked, my voice hesitant. "Yes, Marcus!" she snapped as if I were an idiot. "I took 3 tests. They're all positive." I sat there, stunned, trying to figure out how to react. Should I be happy? Supportive? I felt nothing but numbness. "Say something!" she demanded, her tone shifting from eager to irritated. "I don't know what to say," I admitted honestly. She rolled her eyes. "This is good news, Marcus. We've been trying for this." Had we? We had been trying for a baby, sure, but also for a better relationship. Something to make us feel normal again. But nothing had been normal for a long time. The timing felt off, and I couldn't shake the nagging doubt that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the blessing she made it out to be. Elena acted as though the pregnancy had magically solved all our problems, as if we were back on stable ground. She started throwing herself into baby names, nursery ideas, and Pinterest boards, talking excitedly about the future. Meanwhile, I felt like I was drowning in uncertainty. Every mention of the baby sent my thoughts spiraling into darker places. What if it wasn't mine? What if her late nights and sketchy excuses had meant more than I wanted to believe? I hated myself for thinking like this, but I couldn't stop. I tried to play along because I didn't know what else to do. I nodded at her suggestions, accompanied her to a few doctor's appointments, and feigned interest when she showed me ultrasound pictures. But deep down, it felt wrong. The baby hadn't fixed anything. It had only magnified the cracks in our relationship. Our conversations remained shallow and awkward, even forced. One evening, as she handed me another ultrasound photo, she said, "Look, that's our baby," smiling brightly. I forced a smile in return, but felt like a fraud. Inside, I couldn't stop wondering, is this really my child? I started doing the math in my head, going over the timeline. The last time we'd been intimate was months ago. Things had been cold between us for a long time, and even when we tried to reconnect, it felt empty, like we were just going through the motions. The timing didn't add up. By my calculations, she would have conceived during a period when we weren't even acting like a married couple. The thought made me nauseous. I wanted to confront her, to ask if there was something she wasn't telling me. But every time I got close to bringing it up, I hesitated. She was pregnant, and the baby didn't deserve the stress. I began researching paternity tests. There are ways to test during pregnancy, but they're expensive and require the mother's cooperation. I wasn't sure how Elena would react, and honestly, I wasn't ready for that confrontation. I decided to wait. If my suspicions were right, I'd have my answers when the baby was born. Until then, I'd play along to maintain peace. Now I need your advice, Reddit. Am I doing the right thing by waiting? Should I confront her now even if it risks blowing everything up while she's pregnant? Or am I being smart by holding off until I have undeniable proof? I honestly don't know anymore. Update 2. Hi, Reddit. It's been a long time since my last update. I had no choice but to wait until Elena delivered the baby, and afterward I was too consumed by the chaos to post. The day Caleb was born felt surreal. It should have been one of the happiest moments of my life, a fresh start. But for me, it felt like opening a chapter I wasn't ready to read, one full of doubts and unanswered questions. Elena went into labor late one night, and I rushed her to the hospital. She was in pain and snapping at me over everything, how I was driving, how long it took to park, even how I opened the hospital door. I bit my tongue, blaming it on the stress of labor, but deep down, I knew this tension wasn't new. The delivery went smoothly, and within hours, Caleb was here. He was a perfect little boy in every way, or so I wanted to believe. When the nurse handed him to me, I looked down at his tiny face and tried to let go of all my doubts. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this could work out. Maybe the baby was the fresh start we desperately needed. But that fleeting hope evaporated as I looked closer at Caleb. I couldn't ignore the obvious. He didn't resemble me at all. His dark hair and complexion didn't match either mine or Elena's. I told myself babies change, right? But the doubts that had haunted me for months surged back with a vengeance. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. Elena, exhausted after giving birth, fell asleep quickly. I sat quietly in the corner of the room, holding Caleb and staring at him. He was completely innocent in all of this, yet he was at the center of everything I couldn't ignore. I had already decided to get a paternity test, but now I knew I couldn't wait. The hospital discreetly offered testing services, and I requested it before we left. I didn't tell Elena. I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. I needed answers first. The first few weeks at home blurred into endless cycles of sleepless nights and Caleb's cries. Elena seemed to embrace her role as a new mom, sharing countless photos of Caleb on social media and basking in the flood of likes and comments. She acted like everything was perfect, as if the baby had magically repaired all the cracks in our marriage. Meanwhile, I was falling apart. I did everything I was supposed to, changing diapers, feeding Caleb, trying to be involved. But I felt like I was living someone else's life. Every time I looked at him, I searched for some sign, some feature that connected him to me. I desperately wanted to see a resemblance, anything that said, "This is your son." But I couldn't find it. Elena either didn't notice my hesitation or chose to ignore it. She was too caught up in the attention from friends and family. Whenever I brought up my feelings, she'd dismiss them casually. "You're just overwhelmed," she'd say, like my doubts were nothing more than first-time dad jitters. 2 weeks after Caleb was born, the paternity test results arrived. I had been dreading that email, but as soon as it came, I opened it. The words hit me like a freight train. Probability of paternity, 0%. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. I had braced myself for this possibility, but seeing it spelled out so clearly was a completely different experience. Caleb wasn't mine. Suddenly, everything clicked. The late nights, the vague excuses, the odd timing, it all made sense. Elena had been lying to me from the moment she discovered she was pregnant. I sat in my car, parked a block away from our house, trying to figure out what to do next. My thoughts kept circling back to Caleb and the moments we had already shared. He didn't deserve any of this. He was just a baby, caught in the middle of a mess he hadn't created. But Elena? She had some serious explaining to do. That night, after Caleb was asleep, I confronted her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice colder than I'd intended. She glanced up from her phone, frowning. "What now?" Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and opened the test results. "I got a paternity test," I said, handing it to her. Her face went pale as she read it. "You tested Caleb without telling me?" she asked, her voice trembling with anger. "Yes," I replied firmly. I needed to know the truth. She stammered, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. "Marcus, I can explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, my voice sharp. "That you've been lying to me for months? That you let me believe Caleb was mine when you knew he wasn't?" Tears began streaming down her face. The kind of tears that once would have made me want to comfort her. Not anymore. It was a mistake, she sobbed. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just one night and I didn't know how to tell you. Who's the father? I asked, my tone cutting. It doesn't matter, she said, shaking her head. It matters to me, I snapped. It matters to Caleb. Finally, she admitted it was someone she worked with, a man she had been seeing during the worst months of our marriage, a time when we were supposedly rebuilding trust. Excuses poured out of her. She felt neglected, she made a mistake, she thought I'd never find out. None of it mattered. Over the following days, I met with a lawyer and started the process of filing for divorce. The lies, the betrayal, the entitlement, it was all too much. There was no salvaging this marriage. I was done. One evening, after Caleb was asleep, I handed Elena the divorce papers. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the documents neatly stacked between us. This is it, Elena, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. We're done! I can't stay in this marriage. She picked up the papers and flipped through them, her expression unreadable until she reached the section about finances. Her face twisted in anger. You're seriously leaving me with nothing? She snapped, slamming the papers down. I frowned. You're not entitled to anything, Elena. Caleb isn't my child, and you lied to me for months. I don't owe you a dime. Her eyes narrowed. You've been acting like Caleb's father this whole time. You can't just walk away now. What about child support? What about all the sacrifices I've made for this family? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sacrifices? She was the one who destroyed our marriage, and now she was trying to guilt me into paying for her mistakes. Elena, I said firmly, you made this mess, not me. You lied, you cheated, and you let me believe Caleb was mine. I've done more for him in a few weeks than his real father probably ever will. But that doesn't mean you get to drain my bank account. Her jaw tightened as she crossed her arms. You think a judge will see it that way? I've been a stay-at-home mom for weeks now because of Caleb. I gave up my career for this family. That was rich, considering she'd spent most of her time scrolling through Instagram and pretending to be the perfect mom for likes. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal battles. Elena made it abundantly clear she wasn't going to give up without a fight. She hired an attorney who specialized in aggressive tactics, and suddenly I was bombarded with a flurry of demands. She wanted spousal support, money for Caleb's expenses, and even a portion of her medical bills from the pregnancy. Her lawyer argued, Mr. Marcus acted as the father during the pregnancy and birth, and it is in the child's best interest for him to continue providing financial support to the household. It was absurd. Thankfully, my lawyer, a no-nonsense professional, wasn't having any of it. We'll fight this, she assured me during one of our meetings. You've been deceived, and there's no legal basis for her claims. Despite her confidence, the process was draining. Every time it felt like we were making progress, Elena found a way to throw another wrench into the works. She'd make last-minute demands, refuse to cooperate during negotiations, and even tried to frame me as the villain for abandoning her and Caleb. During one of our court-mandated mediation sessions, Elena's true nature came to light. We sat across from each other in a small conference room, accompanied by our lawyers. She was dressed as if attending a high-profile event, her hair and makeup flawless, clearly hoping to play the innocent wronged wife card. I just don't understand how you can be so heartless, she said, her voice dripping with feigned emotion. After everything we've been through, you're just walking away and leaving me and Caleb with nothing. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to remain calm. Elena, you lied to me for months. Caleb isn't my child. You don't get to play the victim here. She scoffed. You acted like his father. You think you can just turn your back and walk away? Yes, I replied firmly, because that's what happens when you deceive someone about something as important as paternity. Her lawyer tried to interject, bringing up emotional bonds and continuity of care, but my lawyer quickly shut it down. Your client has no legal grounds to demand support for a child who isn't my client's, she said sharply. Furthermore, Mrs. Elena knowingly misrepresented the situation, which could be considered fraud. Should we explore that angle instead? Elena's face turned beet red, and for once, she had no clever comeback. The turning point came when the court ordered her to reveal Caleb's biological father. She had avoided the topic for weeks, claiming it was irrelevant, but the judge wasn't buying it. When she finally admitted it was a coworker she had been seeing during our rough patch, everything fell into place. Her credibility was shattered, and any sympathy the court might have had for her evaporated. The judge ruled that I had no obligation, financial or otherwise, to Elena or Caleb. My lawyer even managed to block her attempt to claim spousal support, successfully arguing that her actions were the direct cause of the marriage's breakdown. When the final ruling was announced, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Elena's demands were denied, and I was officially free. Elena, on the other hand, was furious. She stormed out of the courtroom, muttering about how unfair it all was and how she deserved better. But this time, her entitlement got her nothing. Final update. Hey, Reddit. It's been a while since I last shared my story, and a lot has happened since then. After finalizing my divorce from Elena, I thought you might appreciate an update. Once the divorce was settled, I moved out of the house and into a small but cozy apartment on the other side of town. At first, adjusting to life on my own felt strange, but it quickly became liberating. No more constant tension, no more pretending everything was fine. It was just me, my space, and a chance to start over. I threw myself into work and started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in years. It turns out exercise really does help clear your head. I also picked up hobbies I'd neglected during my marriage, like hiking and photography. Friends who had drifted away during my marriage, probably because of Elena, started reaching out again. Reconnecting with them felt like rediscovering myself after years of being lost. As for Elena, she wasn't doing so well. A mutual friend told me that Caleb's biological father completely ghosted her after being named in court. Apparently, he wanted nothing to do with her or the baby, and even transferred to another office to avoid her. Real classy. With no real support system, Elena was left scrambling. Her parents, who had initially backed her during the divorce, were furious when they found out she'd lied to me about Caleb's paternity. They cut back on financial help, forcing her to face the consequences of her actions for the first time. Elena tried to maintain appearances on social media, posting about being a strong, independent woman and a loving single mom, but anyone who knew her could see she was struggling. Eventually, she reached out to me. One evening, she called, her voice shaky. "Marcus, I've been thinking a lot, and I feel like we should talk," she began. I didn't let her finish. "There's nothing to talk about, Elena," I said flatly. She sighed dramatically, playing the victim as always. "I know I messed up, but we had something real. Don't you miss what we had?" I almost laughed. "What we had was built on lies, Elena. I've moved on. You should do the same." She started crying, but I wasn't falling for it this time. I wished her the best and hung up. A few weeks later, she showed up at my apartment. I have no idea how she found out where I lived, probably through a mutual friend. She stood at my door holding Caleb, looking tired and desperate. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't want to create a scene, so I let her in. She sat on my couch, bouncing Caleb on her knee, and launched into a speech about how she had changed and how we could make things work. For Caleb's sake. "Marcus, I know I've hurt you, but Caleb needs a father figure," Elena said, her voice trembling as tears began to well up in her eyes. "You've always been so good to him." I stared at her, barely believing the words coming out of her mouth. "Elena, Caleb already has a father, and it's not me," I replied firmly. "You don't get to use him as a tool to manipulate me into coming back." She looked at me as though I'd slapped her. "You're really going to turn your back on him?" "I'm not turning my back on Caleb," I said, my tone unwavering. "I'm turning my back on you." After that, she left, but not without another dramatic display of tears and attempts to guilt me. In the days that followed, she began sending me lengthy text messages, talking about how much she missed me, how Caleb needed me, and how we could have a fresh start. I ignored most of them. When she wasn't trying to make me feel guilty, she was appealing to my sympathy. She'd talk about how difficult it was being a single mother, how the bills were piling up, and how lonely she felt. Part of me did feel sorry for her. Caleb hadn't asked for any of this after all. But I refused to let her pull me back into the chaos she had created. I couldn't ignore the pity I felt for her. During our marriage, she had been so entitled, so convinced she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. Now, she was left with nothing but her mistakes and the reality of her actions. As much as I cared for Caleb during those early weeks, he wasn't my responsibility. I hoped for his sake that Elena could get her life together, but I wasn't going to be her safety net any longer. Looking back, I feel proud of myself for walking away. It wasn't an easy decision, and there were moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But now, seeing where I am compared to where Elena is, I know I made the best choice for myself. If Elena's downfall taught me anything, it's that you can't let someone else's lies and manipulation control your life. So yeah, Reddit, things are finally looking up for me. As for Elena, she's still trying to figure out how to clean up the mess she created. I wish her the best. She's going to need it.